Another important step taken by the National Assembly was the eradication of special privileges. All special privileges that were held by the First and Second Estate were abolished. Church lands were seized and divided up and sold amongst the peasantry. A civil constitution of the clergy was established in which church officials were elected by the people and their salaries were paid by the government, and this was done to lessen the influence of the church within France. As a result, 2/3 of the clergy fled France rather than swear an allegiance to the government and to the civil constitution of the clergy. All feudal dues, all those taxes that nobility claimed and took from the peasantry and the middle class, were ended, and all religious taxes, all tithes, were eradicated as well. And as was mentioned, all of the privileges that the First and Second Estate held were abolished and ended. As well as the special privileges of the First and Second Estate being abolished, reforms in local government were put into place under the period of time of the National Assembly. The 30 provinces that had existed in France prior to the Revolution were abolished, and their intendants, those representatives of the king who ruled in those regions, were replaced with elected governors, and 83 new regions or new departments were put into place by the National Assembly, and they were ruled by the elected governors. New courts were established with judges elected by the people so that courts were fair and were not always biased towards the government or towards the crown. Constitution of 1791 was put into place, a written constitution. This was done under the National Assembly. And at this point in time, France becomes a limited monarchy. In other words, there is a king, but his rule is guided by the Constitution, and the king becomes basically a head of state, and so much of his power is removed. All laws are created by the Legislative Assembly of the time period, and governed, the state itself is governed by these laws and not by the power of the monarchy. Feudalism is abolished, so all those feudal privileges that the clergy and the nobility had are ended. And voting was put into place, but male citizens in France could vote, but they had to be individuals who were taxpayers. And offices within the government were reserved for individuals who actually owned property. So even with the Constitution of 1791, we see that there is equality, but not complete equality, as property ownership and the ability to pay taxes plays an important role in who can vote and who can be placed into office. The new government is known as the Legislative Assembly, and this marks the time period with a new phase of the revolution coming into place. And so for a period of time between 1791 and 1792, that year during the French Revolution, the second phase is known as the Legislative Assembly. During this period of time, the royal family, the king, basically being held captive in Paris, attempt to escape, and they try to escape to Austria. Unfortunately for themselves, they're caught in June of 1791. Many nobles who had fled the revolution and had fled France were living abroad and were seeking aid from foreign powers, and they hoped that with foreign help that they could abolish and overthrow the revolutionary government and restore France to the monarchy that had been in place previously. Also, church officials who had fled wanted church lands and rights and privileges restored, and there were many devout Catholics as well who still supported the church and saw what the revolutionary government was doing as being a little bit too extreme. Landless peasants as well were angry because they were neither taxpayers nor held property, and so they could not run for office. And so they were quite angry with the fact that they couldn't vote or, as I mentioned, hold any government position. And so what we see happening with these various interests sort of emerging in against the revolution at the time, we see political parties emerging, and two major political parties representing different interests emerge: the Girondists and the Jacobins. The Girondists tended to be more moderate. The Jacobins tended to be more revolutionary and radical in nature. And so what we see is opposition to the new government under the Legislative Assembly. And part of this opposition comes from outside of France. Many monarchs, kings, and emperors are worried that the revolution within France and the ideas of the revolution might spread and might lead to their overthrow and downfall. And so to prevent this revolution from spreading, they want to contain it, and so they attempt to crush it. France at that point in time is invaded by outside forces, particularly those of the Austrian and Prussian empires, and so the revolution is in danger of being squashed. In the uproar that takes place with this invasion, the Commune of Paris takes control, and this Commune is led by Danton, a member of the Jacobin political party, and they are fairly extreme and radical in nature. So voters begin electing representatives for a new convention, which would write a republican constitution for France, something would be even more radical, and a republican government, in other words, a republic, a government that is elected with representatives elected to represent the interests of people. And so the abolition of the monarchy in its entirety is what is going to take place. And while this is in the process of taking place, and with all the fear of foreign forces coming in and invading, many nobles are executed on the suspicion that they are conspirators to a foreign invasion, and this results from the great deal of fear that takes place during this period of time. And as this takes place, the revolution takes on a more radical face. So the next phase of the revolution, the convention, which is extremely radical in nature and violent, is known as the convention, and it lasts between 1792 and 1795. And so on September 22nd, 1792, the convention met for the first time and established the first French Republic. So the monarchy is abolished in its entirety. And the royal family, the king and queen, are put on trial for treason. They're found guilty, and on January 21st of 1793, Louis XVI is guillotined or executed, and following this, on October 16th, his wife Marie Antoinette is executed. Faced with domestic opposition that's taking place during this time, Girondists, who tended to be more moderate and were more representative of the rich and middle class of the provinces, were in strife and competition with the Jacobins, who were led by more radical individuals, Marat, Danton, and Robespierre, and these individuals tended to work the lower classes, the workers of Paris and France, and so they were more radical in nature. The fact that there were competing interests within the French Revolution, and on top of this, faced with the opposition from outside, from Austria, England, Holland, Prussia, even Sardinia and Spain, these countries formed an alliance and began invading France. And so during this period in time, the revolutionary government takes on an extreme case and looks at eliminating conspirators wherever they may see them. And with this growing coalition against the French, as I had mentioned, the French revolutionary government begins to take on drastic measures. First, they draft Frenchmen into the army to defeat this foreign coalition, and their troops, the French troops, are led by General Carnot. And the people support the military because they don't want to go back to the old regime with the monarchy and the privileges of the First and Second Estate. In fact, it's at this point in time that the current national anthem of France, the Marseillaise, is written, and it becomes a basic anthem and inspiration for the troops, and it's the music that leads them into battle. Finally, after 2 years of fighting, not only was the coalition defeated, but France, under this general, actually gains territory, and so the danger of the revolution being squashed by outside forces is ended. Now, another phase within the revolution takes place, the Reign of Terror, which is still in some areas considered part of the convention. And what happens is the convention, even with its military successes, they still face a great deal of problems domestically. And so thanks to his role in the Paris Commune, Danton and his Jacobin political party, these radicals, they come to dominate French revolutionary politics. So Danton heads what is called the Committee of Public Safety, and later on an even more radical individual, Robespierre, leads this committee. And this group basically is tasked with crushing any perceived threats against the revolution. So anyone accused of treason by this Revolutionary Council, this Committee of Public Safety, is executed by guillotine. And approximately 15,000 people are executed on the guillotine, including such innovative thinkers and pro-women rights as Olympe de Gouges and Madame Jean Rollin. And so the revolution becomes quite excessive at this period of time, with all the executions taking place. Here is a picture of Madame Rollin on her way to the guillotine, her execution, and this picture basically symbolizes the extreme and radical and excessive nature that the French Revolution takes on during the convention. Now, the end of the Reign of Terror comes, and basically it comes when the Girondists, the more moderate political party, tries to end the Reign of Terror. And unfortunately, many members who are trying to oppose this are accused of treason, and they are themselves executed. And in fact, eventually the leader of the Jacobin party, Danton, even wanted to end the executions, and as a result of this he's tried for treason and he is himself executed. Robespierre then becomes the leader of the Committee of Public Safety, and he continues the executions. And the convention, however, comes to blame Robespierre for the excessiveness of the Reign of Terror, and eventually in July 1794 has him executed, and with his execution the end of the Reign of Terror takes place. So following this, what we see is the constitution of what they call Year 3 of the Republic, which is 1795. And with the foreign invaders having been defeated and the Reign of Terror ended, the convention is finally able to put into place a new constitution. And this constitution of the Year 3 of the Republic creates the Directory, which is basically an executive body that runs the French revolutionary government. There are 5 directors, and they're appointed by the legislature, the convention. And the legislature itself has 500 members. It's the lower house where they propose laws, and there's an upper house of 250 members who then vote on them, and 2/3 of the legislature would then be initially filled by members of this revolutionary body, the convention. And so there's still an attempt to maintain a revolutionary element to the French government. Now, the qualifications: the Girondists had defeated the Jacobins, and so the new constitution stated that the right to vote, or suffrage, as well as the right to hold office, would be limited to property owners. And so the revolution is becoming a little bit more conservative. It's no longer total equality. In order to have the vote and to hold office, you have to own property.